JBS presents the Hampton Synagogue's Author Discussion Series with Rabbi Avraham Bronstein.
During his tenure as Attorney General, Abrams received numerous awards and honors and earned national prominence rarely achieved by a state-level official. He served as president of the National Association of Attorney Generals and was selected by his colleagues to receive the coveted Wyman Award as Outstanding Attorney General in the nation. Mr. Abrams' memoir, The Luckiest Guy in the World, has received numerous accolades. Michael Bloomberg says that, quote, that Bob Abrams has many good stories from his life of public service as he does accomplishments, from taking on the party machine to fighting for civil rights. Bob always led with the values that we need more of in government: integrity, decency, and courage. He may be lucky, but we, the people, are luckier still. And Senator Joe Lieberman, who was here a few weeks ago, states, Bob Abrams was a role model and a mentor for me and others. In his memoir, Bob provides an antidote to the toxic and tawdry politics of our time. His public service was always civil, thoughtful, and principled. This very readable and enjoyable book shows how one good person can make a great difference. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bob Abrams to the Hampton Synagogue.
So nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. It's a great honor to be here.
Okay, let's get right to it. The book is called The Luckiest Guy in the World. It's your political memoir. Really, it's your autobiography. And a question that we often ask people who write their memoirs and then do these discussions is this memoir something that you were planning to write for a long time, or did something happen that inspired you to write it? What was the motivation behind you putting down your life story?
Well, I was in public office for 28 years, and very often throughout that period of time, I thought that it might be a good idea to write a book, particularly when I was Attorney General, because a lot of important things were happening, but I never got around to it. And lo and behold, I'm out of public life for 25 years, and I realized that I now had, and I was blessed to have 8 grandchildren, all of whom were not around when I was in public life. And so I thought that maybe I should be recording something to tell them what their Grandpa Bob did during a significant portion of his career and his life. And so I talked into the microphone of an oral historian who teaches oral history at Columbia. And lo and behold, after he gave me some of these transcripts to read and edit, it started to look like a book. And lo and behold, that's what brings us here tonight.
So the book is essentially a series of oral histories that have been edited, or did you have to go back and kind of re-research some old topics and kind of dig back into it in like a more academic way?
Well, I had to dig deep because I didn't keep that diary, but I had to dig deep to think about a whole variety of things. My life growing up in the Bronx, in Pelham Parkway, my old neighborhood, my early races for public life, and all kinds of stories. And by the way, the publisher told me that what I gave him was too long, so more than half the book is on the cutting room floor. I had to remove 100,000 words, so maybe there's a second book around. But
right, there's a director's cut coming.
Yeah, but it was. If somebody wants to try to write a book, take it from me. It is not easy. It took me 4 years to do all of this and to sit and edit it, and to try to make it a respectable product that would be well received by the public.
So I don't want to get too much into your actual life story or the stories that are in the book, because we want to encourage people to buy it and to read it without getting the main part of the story before. But maybe just a little bit of a teaser. So I'll ask you, as a young person growing up in the Bronx, what encouraged you to get into politics in the first place? How did it all start?
Well, I never dreamt that I would actually run for public office. In the GO, in my high school, I was elected a state representative. I did some leadership things in college, but I never dreamt that I would ever present myself to the public running for public office. And life is serendipitous, and the book talks about what specifically got me into politics. I had a term paper assignment at Columbia, and the professor said, I want a paper about your congressional district. Tell me everything about the district. Who lives in the district? What are the parameters of the district? What's the economics of the district? And then he said, and finally, I want you to interview your congressman. And I tried to interview my congressman, who then was Charlie Buckley, a 30-year incumbent, the chairman of the Public Works Committee in the House of Representatives, the boss of the Bronx. And I couldn't get to him. I said, well, maybe I'll call his district office. There was no district office. I called his office in Washington. I left 3 messages. No one ever got back to me. And so some years later, as a result of my attending a reception and my name going to a Reformed Democratic Club because Herbert Lehman and Eleanor Roosevelt were trying to get rid of the old line bosses, somebody called me and said, can you get involved in a campaign? I said, well, I love that reception and I think it's a great idea to be involved, but I can't do it now, I'm too busy. Oh, please, we have some terrific races. And I said, look, I'd love to do it, but I can't do it now. And she said, look, we're running for party office and we've got some terrific races for public office, important ones. We're running against Congressman Buckley. I said, what did you say? That SOB? I said, you got me. And that's what got me into politics. I volunteered in his campaign for a man who ran against him, David Levy. He lost 2 years later. They got me into the campaign again, and Jonathan Bingham upset him. And lo and behold, a year later, for a whole variety of other fortuitous circumstances, I ran for the state assembly against my local assemblyman, who was a powerhouse in Albany. It was a David and Goliath race. I was 27 years old. I had no money. And lo and behold, I won because I had a lot of people power behind me and I had some important issues to talk about in the campaign.
So once you got into politics, what kept you in politics? Why did you like it so much?
Oh, there's nothing more exciting and meaningful. A lot of people in our country, and it's understandable because headlines often express disdain for those who betray the public trust. But I always viewed government and being involved in politics as a calling. I mean, there are doctors, they see their profession as a calling, librarians, teachers. Well, what about people who are in public life? I mean, what a great honor, what a great opportunity to serve and to get things done. And so I loved every second of it. I had 3 different responsibilities. I was a member of the legislature, considering laws, introducing bills. I was the borough president of the Bronx, a very diverse community with a lot of different problems. An important urban center, and then having the opportunity to serve as Attorney General of the state of New York and having the privilege of trying to reshape that office because it was a backwater, sleepy office around for 200 years, but I was privileged during my time to be able to work with my colleagues and reshape it and make it into a powerhouse, a protector of people's rights, a frontline protector, protecting people against environmental abuse, consumer fraud, civil rights opportunities for enforcement. So reproductive freedom, because women's rights to control their own body were being threatened. So what an opportunity. I loved every minute, every second of it. And that's one of the reasons why I consider myself the luckiest guy in the world.
Beautiful. That answer gave me my next 2 questions, which actually are on the cards, which means that we're doing great. Question number 1 is, you just mentioned how your political career, kind of wound forward from state assembly to borough president to attorney general, and then other sort of cameo appearances here and there along the way. What were the main lessons that you carried from job to job? So when you went from being a state assemblyman and then you became borough president. What were the lessons that you took with you to make you successful in that position? And then what were the lessons you took with you from there that made you successful as an attorney general?
Well, one of the fundamental lessons was to try to be true to your values, to what you talk about in campaigns, to your pledges. And I was an insurgent. I was an independent. I was a person who was against the establishment, the established interests. I wanted to do good things. I was an idealist, and I wanted to implement my idealism in a very pragmatic way as an elected official. So I did that in the state assembly. I introduced bills that upset the establishment. People in those days, they never heard about trying to get interest on checking accounts, protecting consumers. One of my pieces of legislation that got enacted, and we talk about it in my family because not everybody knows about this bill, is putting a marker on glass doors, because thousands of people every year walk through glass doors and glass panels and got severely disfigured. And it was just, I read about it in a magazine, I introduced the bill, so what an exciting thing to be able to help people in a whole variety of ways. So I carried that from the assembly to borough president, fighting for people. The Bronx was a very diverse borough. Jews, blacks, Hispanics, Germans, Irish, people of different backgrounds, economic standing, different communities. And I was the youngest borough president elected at that time. And I tried to show people that we can all work together, we can all hang together, let's not be jealous of each other. I worked for participatory democracy. People in the various neighborhoods could help establish the priorities for their own district, improving parks, building libraries, building new police stations and firehouses, creating the first museum in the history of the Bronx. Making sure that Robert Moses wouldn't steal the Hall of Fame from the Bronx, making sure that the Yankees were going to stay in the Bronx because they were threatening to leave. Lots of important things that could be done as borough president. And then, as Attorney General, continuing that independence, running that office. I got elected to that office, but I was determined to make that office a paragon of quality, a citadel of excellence. I wanted to run it as a meritocracy. You were not going to get your position as an assistant attorney general. You weren't going to get hired because you knew the right people, because you made a contribution to the attorney general's campaign. For the first time in the history of the office, I barred contributions from anybody who worked for me. That was unheard of. I said, you cannot make a contribution to my campaign, or your spouse can't do it. I didn't want people, to have politics intrude into their responsibility as being an assistant attorney general to do the work of the people and the public. I said, I'll be the politician. I'll go out front. I'll explain my record. You help me build the record by doing good things and working in the office. So bringing people to that office, I made that office more reflective of the population of the state. Women, for the first time, becoming lawyers. I hired them. I not only hired them, I put them into positions of major responsibility. The Solicitor General, the state of New York, division heads, bureau chiefs, section heads, heads of regional offices, minority people. It was unheard of to have the kind of hiring that I had from the Hispanic community and the black community. And so it was exhilarating, it was exciting to run an office where everybody came to work because they loved their job. They didn't punch a time clock. People were leaving jobs in private law firms at huge cuts in salary to come to work in the Attorney General's office. So it was tremendously exciting to run an office like that and to bring about substantial change, environmental reform, governmental reform, civil rights enforcement, and maybe we can talk about some of those specifics.
The foreword of this book was written by Letitia James, the current Attorney General, right, who you endorsed during her campaign. Letitia was actually here several weeks ago in conversation with Rabbi Schneier. And the fact that she wrote the foreword for your book testifies to the fact that the impact that you had on that office continues, that she sees herself as a continuation of the process of reforming the Attorney General's office that you began, so that it wasn't just something that you did while you were in office, but that was 20 years ago and now 25 years ago, and now things have moved on, but she sees herself as following in your footsteps. So maybe you can speak a little bit more specifically to what happened. It's really a two-part question. Part one is, do you see, looking at the country now, looking at the 50 attorneys general, whether what you did really set a paradigm that other state attorney generals copied in terms of how they saw their office? And number two is, when you think about the impact in New York State, do you see New York State kind of sliding back after your tenure, or do you see New York State continuing to, in terms of how you created that office?
So a couple of fundamental things. The historic role of the Attorney General was defensive, to defend the state. Lots of lawsuits are brought against the state of New York, and the state needs lawyers to defend it. And the Office of Attorney General has been in metamorphosis. It's undergoing change. And I felt that the office should not just merely be defensive, but it should be offensive. On behalf of the people and the public interest, the Attorney General should launch investigations and bring lawsuits, initiate lawsuits. Bring a lawsuit against an environmental polluter to clean up a river or a stream or an aquifer that they degraded and damaged, causing poisoning of people who drink that water. Creating an opportunity for the Attorney General to bring lawsuits against companies that conspire against the consumer and the public interest by bringing antitrust actions. So I returned millions, tens of millions of dollars to the wallets and pocketbooks of consumers, bringing lawsuits against companies that defrauded and cheated the public, bringing lawsuits to enforce people's civil rights. Never before did an Attorney General seek to file friend of the court briefs, amicus curiae briefs, before the United States Supreme Court, saying a woman should have the right to control her own body on reproductive freedom issues. And so the role of Attorney General depends in large part on who the Attorney General is at any one point in time. So it was very exciting to bring that office into the modern era and to take on significant actions that affected large numbers of people. And then secondly, to bring about cooperation among attorneys general. I was the president of the National Association of Attorneys General, and I showed respect and deference to my colleagues. It didn't matter whether they were Republicans or Democrats. It didn't matter whether they were liberals or conservatives. It didn't matter whether they were the Attorney General of a small state or a large state. We were all colleagues. We were all elected by our own constituents to do a job, to bring about justice, to bring positive relief to the problems of our constituents. And so we launched joint investigations, and we brought about joint prosecutions. So the states became very powerful, where in the past the attorneys general were passive and were not overly active in a whole variety of ways. And so when I left office, for example, that kind of thing continued, and attorneys general brought an action or a series of actions against the tobacco industry. 46 attorneys general brought lawsuits against tobacco companies saying, you defrauded the public over the years. You didn't tell people that nicotine was addictive. You didn't warn people that if they smoked, that they would get cancer and get sick. You didn't warn people that as a result of people smoking and getting sick, it would cost the citizens of states millions of dollars because they would wind up in hospitals. They would need surgery. They would be a drain on the medical care system of our society. And so 46 attorneys general got $220 billion returned to the public interest as a result of working together and having those lawsuits. And today, the opioid crisis is being investigated by attorneys general. Attorneys general are on the front line. They're frontline protectors. And I was privileged to be able to be in office at a time when Ronald Reagan had a laissez-faire policy. Get the government off the back of business, and all the problems didn't go away, they magnified. So people complained to state attorneys general, and we in New York took the lead, working with others, to launch these investigations, to do things cooperatively, and it changed the office forever.
Just the way that you framed yourself as working against the laissez-faire attitude of President Ronald Reagan at the time, you were known in your day as a progressive crusader, right? You were a progressive. You were very active in that way. When you look at what's the contemporary progressive movement, the people who consider themselves progressive nowadays, do you see a continuity with the movement that you began, or do you see something a little bit different? It's not a partisan question.
Yeah.
It's just a perspective question.
Well, I see some continuity, but again, some of the people who are progressive and have some socialist labels and values, they go a little too far. I mean, I don't believe that we should abolish police departments around the country. But I was a progressive based upon my rearing. My grandparents were immigrants. They came from Russia. They suffered from pogroms. They suffered from discrimination. And they came here to the Golden Medina, to the Golden Land, to this wonderful country of opportunity to make a better life for themselves and their families. And they had progressive values. They wanted to organize people in labor unions so that they can bring benefits to ordinary citizens. And my father got it from his parents, and my father gave it to me. And so, I came to office with a set of values. I wanted the bounty of this country, this very great, wealthy, wonderful land, to have the bounty shared by as many people as possible. We should try to have as many people get education and not have it priced out of their range. I mean, I'm appalled at $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 bills for college education. I read a story the other day that somebody was 65 years old and still paying off college debt. That's absurd. We should give an opportunity for all people to get higher education and to be productive and to expand their horizons. And so, progressive values are important to me, and I'm glad to see that there are voices in the Congress today who talk progressively.
You said in the very beginning of this conversation that what kind of sparked your interest in writing this book was the fact that your grandchildren all grew up after your public career, and they really didn't know the stories or the issues or the things that motivated you for so much of your life. When somebody like your grandchildren, somebody who wasn't there during your career, reads your book, what message do you want them to come away with?
A lot of good messages. First of all, ordinary people can make a difference. My father ran a candy store. He had to drop out of high school to help his father, earn a living for the rest of the family. So, when I ran for Attorney General, I was interviewed on my first day in office by Stan Brooks. And I was in 2 World Trade Center, and we looked out the window, and he said, "Bob, what's it like being Attorney General of the state of New York?" And I said, "Stan, let's look out this window. There's the Statue of Liberty, my God, in the harbor. My grandparents were on a ship, and they saw that statue. I'm not sure they saw that statue, because they were probably in steerage. They probably couldn't get up to the deck to see Lady Liberty and see this. What a great country this is." So there's a message in the book that ordinary people can gain access to power and the levers of change within the society, that good guys can win. You can bring about change. You can make a difference in a whole variety of ways. That this society is still open. Campaigns are very expensive these days, but if you have the right message, you can deliver that message. So there are a lot of positive things about that book, which I try to have go out as a message that, get involved. When you're in that bed and you only have a few breaths left, you want to feel good about your life. What did you do with that limited amount of time that Hashem gave you, that the Creator gave you? And if you can feel that you tried, and you try to make a difference, and maybe in your own humble and modest way, you brought about a change because you worked on the school board, or you worked on the staff, or you worked for the Legal Aid Society, you represented certain people who had claims to be pursued and to be vindicated, you're going to feel good about yourself and your life. And so, there are a whole variety of positive messages in a world today that brings about a lot of negativism.
Hi, Bob. So, I wanted to tell the people something about you, okay, and what I like. He brings attorney generals every year to Israel to see Israel firsthand. And I think it's kind of basic, and I think it's very productive, and I appreciate it. So I say thank you.
Well, first of all, let me just say what a privilege it is to be here at this synagogue. Rabbi Schneier, early on in his life and career, took a place where there was no Yiddishkeit, and to build a tremendous Jewish community and a tremendous center and activate people like Harvey and Gloria Cayley to give of their resources to help make this, and others in this congregation, to make this such a special place. And Gloria's right. I have a deep commitment to the state of Israel. I think it's unfairly portrayed in the press in many instances, and people get a distorted image of Israel. And I think they have to visit Israel to really understand and know what this society and country is all about. And so every year I help through the America-Israel Friendship League and the government of Israel, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we bring a delegation of state attorneys general from around the country. And these are men and women who don't have an intimate understanding and knowledge necessarily of Israel or the dynamics of the geopolitics of the Middle East. And they spend a week and they go around, they tour like ordinary tourists, but they also get briefings, but they also have an opportunity to come in contact with people, and they see and they listen and they ask questions, and penetrating questions and tough questions. And by the time that week is over, they leave Israel as admirers of the state of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, as Zionists, if you will, willing to speak out and tell the truth about what Israel is all about. So my wife and I, we feel very proud. Very often when we go to the final dinner at the end of the delegation's trip, and they stand up because they're asked, well, we're about to board the El Al flight. What was the week like? What's on your mind? What are you carrying back to your local communities? And invariably, they say, we can't thank Bob and Diane enough for allowing us to come into their children's home for a Shabbat dinner, because they saw an Israeli family up front, up close. They understood a little bit about what Jewish values are all about, what Jewish families are all about. And, they've met with members of the Supreme Court, with the president, with the prime minister. They've met with the ministers of the cabinet and the Knesset, and they stand up invariably and say, the thing that's going to stand out most in my mind, the thing that I called my wife about, was this Friday night dinner that I saw inside an Israeli and a Jewish home. And so having attorneys general go to visit Israel is incredibly important.
Bob Abrams, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.